What is your creepiest, most unnerving experience? When I was 15, I lived on a ranch and cared for my great granny. The only people around were people driving on the highway down the hill, and the neighbor that lived a few miles away. One night at around 2 a.m, a man knocked on the door and asked to use our phone. We didn't have any cell service or internet service out there, or a landline. The fact that he knocked on the door meant that he hopped 2 locked gates and hiked up a hill. I was so scared I just said no. Go away, I have a shotgun. He left. I spent a year in Thailand when I was about 8 years old, while celebrating their new year, Songkran. This big truck of people stopped near where we were standing. This lady jumps off the truck and walks up to me smiling and grabs my arm really hard and starts pulling me towards the truck and almost got me on when my brother comes running and asks me where I'm going. The lady let go and the truck quickly drove away. I didn't realize until I was way older that I almost got kidnapped in a foreign country. Took a photo of my friend the first day at my new place. He helped me move and then we were just having a couple of beers and chilling. He went home. I went to sleep. I woke up the next morning cleaned out. TV was gone and my still unpacked boxes of electronics were all gone too. Door was ajar. I was looking at my photos a few weeks later and I saw a foot sticking out behind my friend in the photo. It was sticking out from a large overhead storage shelf in a small storage room, which was facing into the room and away from the main space. Robber was hiding there before I even moved in. I have the photo somewhere. I was 6 and in a restroom stall at Macy's in the men's restroom. My mom was waiting outside the restroom. While I was using the toilet I can tell there was a man in the next stall because I could see his shoes. His shoes disappear and I can hear the toilet creak as if he started standing on it. I see his hands over the wall of my stall which indicated he was about to peek over. I pulled up my pants in a split second without even finishing taking my dump and bolted out of there. I never told my mom ever. What a creepy frickin' experience. Was coming home to my place at night when I used to live in the city with my roommate at the time. The key didn't work for the front door so I always had to use the back door that led to our kitchen. The door had that blurry glass window on it. Not sure what that's called, but as I was turning the key I could see a figure walk by real fast. I assumed it was my roommate so I went to my bedroom, then checked his room and couldn't find him. I finally went down to our living room only to find the front door completely open. I called my roommate and asked where was he going so fast and why he left the front door open. He told me he hasn't been to our place in a couple hours. So yeah, I was waking into my house while someone was snooping around. I've got a lot of these moments, but one that stands out to me is when I was little. I got up at something like 3 in the morning to get a glass of water and heard something outside the back door. I went and woke up my mom, and when she opened the door to show me there was nothing out there, she tensed up and said hello. I got my dad to call the police. That morning I learned that a druggie had broken into our fenced off yard, used several needles, broke open our outside freezer, stole a brand new bag of pizza rolls, and tried to cook them in the old broken toaster oven we had yet to dispose of. Alright, this story haunts me. Basically, I was 17 and working at a high-end retail shop in a big shopping center, literally the last place you'd expect a ghost story. The shifts used to run quite late over the Christmas period as we'd be open as late as 9 p.m. So it was dark and quiet for a long time. One particular winter night, I was on a late shift with 2 other co-workers. My 2 co-workers were on the shop floor and I was out back taking stock and putting away stocks. If anybody has worked in clothes shops with large stocks, hopefully you'll know what I mean when I say the clothes are stored in rolling racks, like shelves on wheels, and each rack is controlled by a wheel on the side which you spin to move it along the rail. You can also lock the shelves so they don't move. I know that people say this all the time, that they know they did something, but I truly do know that I locked the shelves, and I know this because I was climbing the shelves, using each row as a ladder, to reach the top sections. Had they not been locked, I couldn't have done this as the shelves would have rolled, so I climbed down to grab some more stock, and as I turn around the lights turn off. Now the lights are movement triggered, and I was moving in the space, but even so sometimes they turn off. For some reason though, this plunge into pitch black raised all the hairs on my neck and I froze in my place. There are no windows out back so no light at all. When the lights flickered back on, all 3 shelves, all of which I had locked in place, were rolling towards me on their track, completely unpushed. I have to emphasize that firstly, they were locked, and secondly, if you know what I'm on about, these shelves are heavy, they require pushing and won't move on their own. It's probably quite unprofessional of me, but I couldn't stand another minute and I dashed out into the shop floor completely unable to speak. Luckily we're a small team and I'm quite close with all my co-workers, and my boss could see me visibly shaking. Once she'd calmed me down enough for me to tell her what happened, she said, "Come on, let's just go check the security cameras and see what happened." Here's where it gets really creepy. We went into her office, brought up the security footage, and all that had been captured was the moment the lights went dark. And then it skipped straight to a minute later and you see the door shut after me as I dashed onto the shop floor. The 30 seconds a minute where the shelves rolled towards me was completely unrecorded. Creeps me out just rewriting it. This probably pales in comparison to others' experiences, but it stands out in my mind. I don't remember this super well because I was pretty young, but a contractor that had just replaced the roof on my parents' house apparently didn't pay his employees after my parents paid him for the job. One of said workers showed up at my house very pissed off, yelling and screaming that he wanted money. I just remember being really scared and comforting my little sister who was crying hysterically. My dad didn't budge, and finally the guy gave up and left. We never saw him again. About 5 or 6 years ago, I had been to the pub with a few mates. I don't drink, so I was always happy to drop everyone home, so it saved everyone a taxi fee, and they all bought my soft drinks all night. This one night, we have stayed until about 1 AM. When the pub is at a point where they kick you out, we walk to the car, I drop everyone off, and I'm on my way home. It's about 2:30. It takes me roughly 20 minutes to get back to mine from the last drop off, and I'm about halfway home. Everything is normal. I've gone my usual route and I've got music playing. All of a sudden, out the corner of my right eye, I see what I think is a man running towards my moving car, right up to the driver's window. As soon as he hits the window, he disappears. The stereo in my car stops for no reason and I am just driving in silence, with that horrible sinking feeling of dread. With my hands and feet clamming up, I kept driving until I got to some traffic lights, where I turned the car off and back on to get my music going again. I can't explain what went on, but it still terrifies me to drive down the street where it happened to this day. Where I live there's this phenomenon called the Lindsay lights. Basically, a bunch of people who live out here have seen lights appear above the tree line around the bluffs in the area and they behave strangely. So essentially UFOs. There's even a book about it by a lady and her family who lives in the area. A lot of people have seen them. It's just a known thing in this neck of the woods. One night my boyfriend and I were driving home. We live on the very top of the bluff, and I noticed a light over top of the trees by my uncle's house who lives in the valley between bluffs. It was very bright and absolutely still, but when I looked at it for a few seconds it immediately darted off into the distance in less than a second. It was impossibly fast and very unnerving. A few minutes later when we got home my boyfriend looks at me and goes, "Did you see that tour?" I witnessed a kidnapping while going down a dark back road at night in the Middle East. Saw some guys putting a long black thing into the backseat of a car. They were having a difficult time of it. I thought it was a rug and it was only after I drove past I realized it was a woman in a burqa, but by then I was into a motorway on ramp so I could not go back. I thought of phoning the police but I didn't know how to describe where I was. No mobile or GPS then and street names were in Arabic. It took me 20 minutes to get back there and everyone was gone. It shook me up a lot and thought about what I could have done differently for months. Some friends and I were camping in rural Northern California. Their family had a piece of land they leased near the river and had set up a little campground of like 3 trailers and campers. Obviously not as luxurious as a cabin, but you didn't have to set up a tent each weekend and could invite some friends. It had a perimeter of a bamboo fence which gave the illusion of privacy but obviously wasn't really gonna keep anyone or anything out. That night we hiked up to a vista above the river to smoke a J and look at the stars. Suddenly, from what seemed like across the river, we heard a blood-curdling scream, then dogs barking. We realized it was a mountain lion, which sounds like a woman screaming. Look it up on YouTube. Utterly terrifying. We froze and about a minute later heard the scream again, but this time it sounded much closer. Obviously we decided it was time to hightail it back to camp. The walk was about 5 minutes, but of course felt like forever. It took everything in us to move slowly and not sprint down the hill. We had no flashlights, just the moonlight to guide us, and I kept catching glimpses of what seemed like eyes shining in the dark. I can't tell you how vulnerable the back of my body felt on that walk. Every animal instinct in me was terrified of something coming up from behind. We made it back without incident and all took shots to calm ourselves. Maybe you had to be there, but it was for sure one of the top 3 most terrifying experiences of my life. And I've had knives, guns pulled on me, etc lol. When I was younger, my mom took me to the mall. Upon arriving there, some mall cop walked up to me and just stared at me all strange. My mom quickly got me away from him. Later, my memory is a bit fuzzy here since it happened when I was 5, but the guy tried to grab me for some reason. He was following us the whole time, and my mom decided to go home afterwards. One night I was trying to sleep and I heard what sounded like a woman screaming bloody murder. It turned out to be a lynx that was in my backyard. Dumb cat. When I was little, went to my grandma's house with the family. She had a small house, so we had to sleep on mattresses in the living room. That time, I was around 12 years old. I woke up at night, around 3 or 4 in the morning. I opened my eyes and saw this tall black figure standing in front of my mattress. It just stood there, staring at me. I tried to mumble to it, but then it raised its hands to its sides. Never was I more afraid, and I literally froze. I couldn't do anything and I thought this devil was going to take me. The next thing I heard a moan and my uncle was just stretching his arm before going to the bathroom. We still bring that story up, after 10 years, sometimes, and laugh about it. It's just weird how our body can freeze and leaves you vulnerable.